All right, guys, we just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here doing our 2024 preview and prediction for the Northwestern Wildcats. Looking at this coaching staff, David Braun did excellent, going 8-5 in his debut season, where he was pressed into action after the sudden dismissal of Pat Fitzgerald after a long tenure, bringing a new offensive coordinator in Zach Lejeune. Been with South Dakota State his entire career since 2017. Tim McCargill, been on staff since 2018 as the DC, obviously obliterated expectations, and they're currently on a 4-game winning streak with a team of momentum right here. And they all did this, Nick, with an offense that was quite poor, and you can see the numbers on screen outside the top 100 in numerous different categories. It's very strange to see what happened with this team as, they were able to win with this poor offense. Brendan Sullivan, who was quite solid at quarterback for them. Nothing crazy on the stat sheet, but he did a good job of, putting this offense in position to win games at times in the middle part of the season. Didn't play over the last 4. He ends up transferring out, and he was going to be the presumed starter. It was a poor quarterback room. Ben Bryant played pretty well during that win streak, and obviously he graduates. So you look at what they have now. Mike Wright transfers in from Mississippi State, played some game or missed state after playing some games at Vanderbilt. Showcased some great speed and rushing ability. Has a high, slow release when throwing the ball, though. Ryan Helinski, he's been around a while. Enters his 6th season. Doesn't seem like he's probably going to get much playing time at this point. Jack Losh, likely not a guy they want starting either. Quite poor room, as the penciled-in starter transferring out was pretty odd here. What do you make of them, Nick, having a new, quarterback room, really, and a new offensive coordinator as well?
Certainly is a new look offensive quarterback room. You don't really know what you're going to get here, right? Because Ryan Helinski, he's been around college football for a very long time. Is he going to be able to start and take the keys to the offense? He's previously played at South Carolina, had some success there, hasn't really played a whole lot at Northwestern. And then the other star that you mentioned could potentially be there. Mike Wright could potentially be involved as well. That you could see Mike Wright had a solid time at Vandy at times as well. Really good rushing ability, solid player who has SEC experience. Is he going to be the one to get the nod? Zach Lejeune, obviously, high prodigy coming out of the FCS level, right? Coaching at South Dakota State as the offensive coordinator, winning 2 natties for a very good SDSU team, right? Really solid player coaching at the FCS level, that is. Now what's going to look like jumping up to the Big Ten, right? This is a huge move in sort of quality. I know obviously it's Northwestern, one of the lower tier teams in the conference, but this is still a very large jump. I don't know exactly what they're going to do at quarterback. I think it's completely a toss-up, and it certainly doesn't bode well for Northwestern, who was not very good at offense at all last year. That doesn't really have a quarterback that's a nailed-on starter this late in the cycle.
Look at Cam Porter, a guy who's been around a long time, super senior, 220-pound physical runner. Hasn't been very efficient, but he's a tough workhorse. Obviously, the efficiency stems from just getting a lot of carries, and they just trust him so much. 651 and 4 touchdowns last year. This is a pretty sound player. I like what he brings to the table. Other than that, Joseph Hyman has some nice open field abilities, a bit of speed as well, but wasn't very efficient, but was an asset as a pass catcher. Other than that, I don't really have much. Caleb Kamawalafi, redshirt freshman, figures to be in the fold as well. This just isn't a very deep running back room, it appears.
This is an interesting room that doesn't have a whole lot of talent. Cam Porter is a solid player and certainly the most talented of the bunch. 651 yards, 3.9 yards per carry, and 4 scores for him last year. Also had 121 yards receiving and 1 score, so you can use him out of the backfield. There is certainly some room to grow potentially there. Joseph Hyman, 136 yards on the ground, 219 yards receiving, and 1 touchdown. So again, another guy used out of the backfield. But outside of that, this running back room doesn't have a whole lot of talent. Very shallow. It's going to rely a lot on Cam Porter to do the heavy lifting, which he hasn't really shown his ability to do that. He gets a lot of carries, but not super efficient. He had 166 carries last year. I would imagine he's going to be close to that number again, if not more. How efficient can he be on those carries? That's certainly the key here.
Look at the wide receiver room. It really wasn't as bad as we originally expected. Bryce Kurtz, he's been the best receiver for them over the past couple of seasons. A pure outside wide receiver, 6'1", 190. Big production jump last season. AJ Henning will occupy the slot, coming off his best career year after transferring in from Michigan, where he was mainly just a punt returner, had only 1 drop in all of 23. Calvin Johnson, only 4 grabs all year, will step into the starting role. Not to be confused with the Lions Hall of Famer. They're hoping they can get some type of play like that, though, out of him. Not much depth behind those guys. Not much tape either on the other guys on the roster. The past OC's offense was just unfriendly towards wide receivers, so I certainly think you can see a boost from all these players. Return both veteran tight ends and Marshall Lang, who's a really good blocker, and Thomas Gordon. The pair did combine for 24 receptions, but only 1 touchdown and less than 250 yards total. Lejeune's offense, Nick, operates out of a more wide-open approach, but also plenty of tight end usage. They love ball control and red zone efficiency, so even though the previous scheme didn't really involve receivers that much. I'm not fully convinced that'll happen here, but again, I do think they'll have more creativity and variety.
There's some room to grow with this new sort of scheme. You can use the tight ends a little bit more often. That two guys that could be potentially involved in that is Marshall Lang and Thomas Gordon. 116 yards receiving for Lang, 112 for Gordon, plus a score. These are two solid tight ends that could be involved early on. Bryce Kurtz, a really solid player, top returning pass catcher, 700 yards receiving and 5 scores for him last year, 14.3 yards per grab. Good numbers in my opinion. I do like what I've seen. AJ Henning is another guy. You plug him in the slot, a solid player in the slot, 418 yards receiving and 4 scores for him. CJ Johnson, he didn't really have a whole lot of grabs last year, but he's moving up the depth chart at that wide receiver X. So there's some room, in my opinion, for this wide receiver room to grow. It's not a phenomenal unit, but I think the tight end play will be a little bit better. I think Henning and Kurtz are two solid wide receivers.
Look at the offensive line. They return 3 starters up front. You start with left tackle Caleb Tiernan, 6'7", 325. He's been a quality pass blocker. Allowed his only sack of the year in Week 1 against Rutgers. Jordan Knox was pretty good in his limited snaps last fall. At left guard as a true freshman. Started the bowl game versus Utah and was good. I think that's certainly a player Knox they're going to be hoping to see big improvements out of as a leader here. Ben Rather was, a big liability for them in the middle, but his backup, Jackson Carstello, was worse than he was when given an opportunity, so things are really, in flux there at the center position. Nick Herzog was slotted in the right guard, but didn't play last year. And then Josh Thompson, he's going to return the right tackle spot where he was just less than stellar in pass blocking. Overall, this unit was amongst the worst in college football, ranking 131st in sacks allowed, Nick. At times they're quite serviceable, right? You don't win 8 games without them being able to play good football at some point. But for the most part, when they were playing bad, it was really bad.
This is an offensive line that's not an incredible unit that really did struggle. They're a very poor unit. They struggled one of the nation's worst. I don't know if they're going to improve this year. These guys get another year of experience. Jordan Knox was a true freshman playing last year. Nick Herzog was a redshirt sophomore, so they didn't have a whole lot of experience. Ben Weather really leads the way with the experience as a graduate senior at center. I think Caleb Tiernan and Josh Thompson are two guys that could be solid on the outside there at left and right tackle, respectively. But overall, this offensive line I don't have high hopes for.
The verdict for this unit, they overachieved last year, but they still only had one game of 400-plus yards. The offensive line returned some vets, but they weren't very good. Run game likely won't elevate much higher. But Henning and Kurtz are a solid wide receiver duo at the same time. The QB room was a complete mess after the apparent starter decided to bolt. I assume Northwestern's around the same on offense. Maybe a little bit worse. I would expect them to be a little bit better, especially if they use Mike right and they can use his legs properly. Then I certainly think they'll be able to stay on the field a little bit more. Really not sure, but I don't think anything's going to be too much different, too much worse here for the Cats. Defensive side of the ball, Nick, they've always been strong here. They added one guy in the portal, lost 5, including 3 very good DBs. They got poached by the larger programs in their secondary. 22.5 points per game allowed here. You start with a defensive line that I think is really underrated. Richie Haggerty was a solid DN for them. Good return for the Wildcats. Jalen Pate was a quality starter. Aiden Hubbard was a good run defender. Was one of the best at generating negative plays for this football team. Sean McLaughlin wasn't all that good, but played a lot of snaps. Essentially returned the entire edge department. On the interior defensive line, Najee Story, bit of an undersized player at D tackle at 6'4", 285, but was on the field and was average. Carmine Bastone was one of the better run defenders on this team. Reginald Pearson was even better than that. Brendan Flake saw 260 snaps. Wasn't very good, but again, the entire defensive line is back. Great depth they have here. No over-the-top talent, but collectively a strong group that's certainly going to improve against the run. They also get back their second leading sack man in Anto Saka. This is absurd, Nick, to see really anybody be able to return this many snaps, even if, again, they're not NFL caliber players, putting up elite production. I think this is a very good, strong starting point for this defense.
This is a really solid, strong starting point. Anto Saka returns 5.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks for him, 13 total tackles last year. Solid numbers there. Sean McLaughlin, 18 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups. He's kind of a do-it-all kind of guy. You can move him around. Really solid there. Brandon Flake, 15 total tackles last year for him. Najee Story, 20 total tackles for him. Solid numbers there. I think there are some other solid pieces here. Cameron Bastone, really good off the edge. 26 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. I look at some other players. Richie Haggerty, 36 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for him. Decent returning production there. Another guy that's a good leader for this defense. Overall, when you look at the start of this defense, I think, Jalen Pate, 27 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. There's some solid returning numbers here. A nice amount of sacks, a nice amount of tackles as well, tackles for loss as well. In general, a nice amount of tackles. I'm really excited for this front part of this defense. It's a really solid unit that can really produce well.
You look at the middle of the defense. One thing Pat Fitzgerald was always known for was just having great linebackers, and obviously Xander Mueller as one of those that's left over from his time here at Northwestern. I mean, this was a highly productive player. He's been on the field really his entire career. It's been impressive the past 2 seasons. 20.5 TFLs during that stretch. Significantly improved his consistency in coverage and run stopping. Really looking to take things to the next level. Mac Ulen wasn't very good. Will step into a starting role. And Kenny Soares Jr. is pretty sound versus the run. Certainly a player I'm looking at to make a big leap forward. Obviously, some of those principles are still going to be here, Nick, when it comes to just hard-nosed football in the middle. Bryce Gallagher did that for years. He moves on. I think Mueller, though, this is going to be a very good player. He's going to be highly productive for Northwestern, but will the rest of the unit replicate that?
It's a unit that is solid, has some good pieces. I do worry about some of the depth, like you were alluding to. But I think Xander Mueller is just a really great player. 110 total tackles for him last year. 10.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 3 picks, 2 pass breakups. Do it all kind of guy. 110 total tackles are really good numbers to return. I think Mueller's a really good physical linebacker, hard-nosed, really solid hitting, really good player top to bottom. Mac Ulen as well that you were alluding to, for 18 total tackles for him. Not incredible production for him, but a guy that's still a solid guy at wide linebacker. Brandon Bruss as well is someone that could be involved in this defense. I do worry about some of the depth. I think when you have a guy like Mueller who's just a really good leader for your team and a really good linebacker who's going to play a ton of snaps and be consistently healthy, that's a really good player to have in your locker room.
You look at a team that was 15th in run defense, or pass defense, that is, obviously against only 358 attempts. So teams weren't exactly coming out here trying to light up the world on fire against them. But Penn State, for example, only 56% completion rating, 220 yards there. They didn't get beat by a horrible Nebraska quarterback room by any means. They had some issues against Maryland, but that was a game they won. They were playing ahead of, and they were able to force, Talia into some mistakes. This was a real legit pass defense. Illinois late in the year, they were able to throttle them for 350 and 4 scores. Other than that, though, Nick, this is a secondary that really never got taken advantage of. And again, it is important to note some of the opponents were low quality, but they're playing opponents here that can really expose them. So they didn't play all that bad one bit. Again, they lose 3 important players here, though. Jaheim Joseph, Garnett Hollins Jr., they're going to West Virginia. Rod Hurd's going to join Marcus Freeman's bunch at Notre Dame. So this is certainly, a big issue for them in today's college football. Obviously, things like that are going to happen. They do return a vet, though, at corner. Theron Johnson, who was solid, did allow near 400 yards, but was sturdy versus the run. Evan Smith will be backing him up. Only played a couple snaps last year. Ori Adai played a good bit last year, was average at best. Devin Turner has best versatility on this team. He's probably going to play the slot. Didn't really make a statement in coverage, but was a pretty good, efficient tackler. Was good in run help. And veteran Coco Azima has been around forever, it seems. Played a good bit, but wasn't that much of a difference maker. Joe DeHaan, who's only played a few games, will also likely step into a starting role. The secondary is likely to step back, Nick. I just don't think they're well equipped to lose those kind of players. They do have some players who have been in the program for a couple of years now, so I think that's certainly something that's important to note. I think Johnson and Azima are going to be leaders here. Looking at a sizable step back, is it going to be major, though? It remains to be seen.
This is a unit that wasn't terrible last year. Obviously they're a really good unit that had some solid leadership, but they lose a lot of those guys, right? 15th in the nation and against the pass. Solid unit overall, but they lose those talented players. Rod Hurd's a tough loss in coverage. Can they find a way to step up and have some solid coverage? I think Devin Turner's a good start there. 79 total tackles, plus 5 pass breaks and a pick. Really solid in coverage, also really solid tackler. Theron Johnson, 37 total tackles, 5 pass breakups. Coco Zima, 47 total tackles and a pass breakup for him, plus a pick as well. Solid numbers there. I think he's a guy that could be involved and really a solid piece for this unit overall. I think Ori Odai, 20 total tackles for him as well. A really decent player in coverage. You can move him around and get him involved. I think, probably most likely going to play him on the right side, but you can move to the left side potentially as well. So there's a secondary unit that's a decent unit. Yes, the losses are very much a large factor in this, and they certainly worry me. But overall, I do think this unit has some nice success, and will round off what could be a really solid defense again.
Looking at the verdict for this side of the ball, I like this defense. They played very hard all season long, forced turnovers, was stout versus the pass. I think the secondary will regress a bit, but they have always been pretty good in the back end of their defense. The D-line can really improve with the return of everybody, and once again have a real deal All-American caliber linebacker in the middle in Mueller. Prediction here, I think for Northwestern, if Iowa can win plenty of games, then so can Northwestern, right? At least that's what they proved last year, is they significantly overachieved, but the defensive effort really wasn't no fluke, and that unit will be just as good or slightly better, I would say. Not much hope for the offense. That part of the team will likely regress. They do have a nice wide receiver duo. They got a quarterback who has some great speed, potentially, if they get right to start. They should be able to spark just enough in certain matchups, Nick. I certainly think this is a hard team to predict. Obviously, they're going to get some freebies early on in the year. I think they'll go ahead and take care of Duke. I think going on the road and playing some of these tougher teams at home it will be tough for them, because it's really not even a home atmosphere, right? They're playing at Wrigley Field, or they're playing in their practice facilities, so certainly don't think they're going to have much energy. I do see them beating teams like Indiana and Illinois, though, stealing those games, because that's just what they've been proven to be able to do and taking care of business for Northwestern. I think this will be a respectable ball team. I think they'll be on the fringe of bowl eligibility, but again, it's hard to expect much from this team.
This is a team that's an interesting team. You alluded to that weird schedule. They're going to play a lot of random different games this year. They're going to play at different sites. They have to play at Wrigley twice. They're going to play, on campus. At a smaller field, they're going to play off campus. It's a very odd setup for this team. I think this team is equally going to struggle. I'm looking at the same schedule as you. I think they're going to lose a similar number of games. I think they're going to lose to Illinois potentially as well. It's a game that they could lose late in the season that would really, put a nail in the coffin to what is a really long losing streak for this team overall. I think this is a team that has high upside. I think they will figure out something in the future. I think they're a team to watch. I think they beat Indiana. I think they win their non-conference, and they take care of Duke. But equally a tough season for me. I think 5-7 is kind of right where I'm at with this team as well. They're a team that I think has some, like I said, high upside. They're a team heading in the right direction. The new stadium on the waterfront there will be fantastic. But this is sort of a transition year under a still new coach in his second year. I like Northwestern to potentially be at that 5-win mark, maybe get to 6 if they get lucky and pick off Purdue on the road. But in general, this should be a tough, long season for Northwestern. They exceeded expectations last year. They certainly could do so again this year, though.
We have for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me talking about the Wildcats here. Like you said, interesting setup. I think it'll be interesting to watch, at least probably from a TV standpoint. And watching this team pull off upsets will also be pretty interesting.
I'm excited to see what this team looks like this year.
If you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.